The storm had already buried most of the valley when Master Chief Rains got the distress ping. A downed Black Hawk helicopter, no survivors confirmed, beacon still active. They sent only two, Rains and his K9 partner, Shadow. Hours passed before they found it, the tail rotor half buried, fuselage twisted, glass frosted white. Shadow started growling before Rains even reached the door. Inside, the crew's harnesses were shredded, blood frozen in strange arcs across the console, and the co-pilot's seat empty. Then Rains found something wedged into the metal, a military tag from a unit that had gone missing months earlier. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more tales of mystery and the unknown. As night fell, the wind howled through the broken hull. Rains activated his recorder and whispered, "We're not alone out here." Then Shadow's ears perked at faint footsteps circling the wreck from outside. Master Chief Thorn Rains stood apart from his celebrating unit in the dimly lit operations room of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. While the other SEALs exchanged high fives and combat stories, Rains methodically field-stripped his sidearm, reassembling it with practiced precision. His movements were economical, almost mechanical, no wasted energy, no unnecessary words. "Always the life of the party, eh, Ghost?" Lieutenant Commander Maddox called from across the room. The nickname had followed Rains for years, not because he moved silently or because of his infiltration skills, but because sometimes the other operators looked right through him, as if he wasn't there at all. Rains acknowledged the comment with a slight nod, but didn't engage. He'd learned long ago that bonds made men vulnerable in the field. Sentimentality got people killed. The room's atmosphere shifted as Commander Sadira Vega entered, her expression grim as she approached Rains directly, bypassing the senior officers. "Master Chief, a word." Her voice was clipped, professional. She held a tablet displaying a topographic map of what appeared to be a remote mountain range. A blinking red beacon pulsed weakly in a narrow valley. The other SEALs fell silent, watching the exchange. Rains caught the glances between them, the whispers. "There he goes again. Special treatment for the Ghost." "Black Hawk down in the Kigluwake Mountains, Alaska," Vega continued, zooming in on the beacon. "Distress signal activated approximately 6 hours ago. Signal strength diminishing, likely battery degradation." "Survivors?" Rains asked, his first word of the conversation. "Unknown, weather conditions extreme, storm system intensifying." Vega's expression gave nothing away. "Winter deployment group is 14 hours out minimum." Rains studied the map, noting the elevation, the surrounding terrain, the narrow valley that would funnel the wind to near-lethal speeds. "Sending Sabre team would be more appropriate," he suggested quietly. "4-man recovery team, standard protocol." "This isn't official," Vega replied. "Just you and Shadow." The room temperature seemed to drop. The other SEALs exchanged looks. One whispered audibly, "The Ghost gets another solo." Rains ignored them, focusing instead on the blinking beacon growing fainter by the hour. "Extraction timeline?" he asked. 6-hour window before the second storm front makes ingress impossible. After that, you're on your own for at least 72 hours. Vega handed him a small memory card. "Command wants any flight recorder data scrubbed before pickup." Rains looked up, his expression questioning the unusual protocol. Vega lowered her voice. "This was Maddox's bird." Rains froze at the name, his hand instinctively touching a worn patch on his uniform with thread marks where something had been removed. Lieutenant Commander Maddox, across the room, was alive and well. But his brother, Captain James Maddox, had commanded Black Hawk operations in the region for the past 3 months. Special operations, classified operations. "Wheels up in 30, Vega said, ending the briefing. As she turned to leave, she added almost imperceptibly, "Watch your 6 out there. This one feels off." Rains gathered his gear with practiced efficiency. No questions asked, no clarification sought. That's why they sent him. The Ghost followed orders. The Ghost didn't ask uncomfortable questions. The Ghost always came back, even when others didn't. In his quarters, Rains packed his Arctic survival kit, while Shadow, his Belgian Malinois, watched with alert brown eyes. The dog's formal designation was Military Working Dog Shadow, call sign Echo 7. But in the privacy of their quarters, he was just Shadow. Partner. the only living being Rains fully trusted. Cold hunt, Rains said quietly, and Shadow's ears pricked forward, recognizing the mission phrase. Rains pulled a worn photograph from his locker, a younger version of himself, standing beside James Maddox in desert fatigues, both men smiling in a way Rains no longer did. He tucked the photo into an inner pocket, then opened a small case containing specialized injectors with cloudy blue fluid. Maddox had called it insurance. Rains called it necessary. He packed 2 vials. 30 minutes later, a C-130 carried them northward through the darkness, the drone of engines the only sound as Rains studied the mission brief. The helicopter had been on routine transport, at least officially. The manifest listed minimal crew, no passengers. But the flight path made no sense for a routine transport, curving deliberately over some of the most inhospitable terrain in North America. "We've got a problem, Master Chief," the pilot announced over the intercom 5 hours later. "Weather's deteriorating faster than predicted. We're looking at a modified drop zone, about 3 clicks east of your target." Rains acknowledged with a thumbs up. Problems were expected. Complications? Standard. He secured Shadow's specialized harness and checked his own chute. The loadmaster gave the signal, and cold air blasted through the cabin as the rear ramp lowered. Below, there was nothing but swirling white and the dark smudges of mountain ridges. "Good hunting, Ghost!" the loadmaster shouted over the roar of engines and wind. The words carried a note of something Rains rarely heard directed his way. Concern. Rains stepped into nothingness. Shadow secured against his chest, and the white void swallowed them whole. The landing was rough, the crosswinds vicious. Rains rolled through deep snow, protecting Shadow with his body until they came to a stop against a ridge of ice-crusted stone. The temperature bit through his cold weather gear immediately, the kind of cold that didn't just chill the body, but seemed to crystallize thoughts themselves. Shadow shook off the snow, seemingly unperturbed by the conditions. Rains checked his GPS. The signal was weak but functional. The drop had put them nearly 4 kilometers from the crash site, not 3. The pilot had been overly cautious, unwilling to risk his aircraft any closer to the mountains in these conditions. Rains didn't blame him. "Weather's dropping fast," the pilot's voice crackled through his comm. "Barometric pressure's falling. You've got 6 hours before I can't get back in." "Copy that," Rains responded. 6 hours. The connection faded to static as the C-130 banked away, leaving them alone in the white silence. Rains unclipped Shadow from the harness and knelt beside the dog. "Hvem ser vi etter?" he asked in Norwegian, part of their private code. "Who are we looking for?" Shadow's ears twitched, understanding the question. The language switching was part of their training: Norwegian for search and rescue, Arabic for combat operations, English for daily commands. It compartmentalized the dog's responses, kept him focused on mission parameters. More importantly, it kept others from easily controlling Shadow if Rains was incapacitated. They began moving through the deepening snow, Rains checking his bearings every 50 meters. The storm intensified, visibility dropping to less than 20 meters at times. Without Shadow, navigation would have been nearly impossible. The dog seemed to sense direction in conditions that confounded even the most sophisticated equipment. An hour into the approach, the valley narrowed, revealing rock formations that caught Rains' attention. Unlike the surrounding geology, these stones showed patterns, near-perfect geometric shapes buried beneath centuries of erosion. No natural process created such symmetry. He paused, photographing the formations before moving on. Rains checked his GPS again, then made a decision. He disabled its transmission function, switching to passive navigation only. "Just like Kandahar," he whispered to Shadow. "We go dark." Shadow's ears pricked up at the mention of Kandahar. The memory flashed unbidden through. Rains' mind, fractured images of a night operation gone catastrophically wrong. Gunfire, shouting. Rains carrying a wounded Maddox through darkness while Shadow ran point. Warning of approaching hostiles. But this wasn't Kandahar. This was something else entirely. As they neared the crash coordinates, Rains noticed anomalies in the snowfall pattern, long, sweeping depressions where something had moved through the area after the helicopter went down. Something large. He knelt, examining the disturbances more closely. Not footprints exactly. More like something had been dragged or had dragged itself across the snow. Rains marked the patterns with infrared tags invisible to the naked eye but trackable through his tactical visor, a technique he'd developed after Kandahar. Leave nothing obvious behind, trust no one but your dog. Shadow suddenly froze, body rigid, hackles raised. Rains immediately dropped to a crouch, signaling silence. The dog's reaction was unmistakable, a threat indicator, but not the standard response to human presence. Rains scanned the ridge above them, seeing nothing through the swirling snow, but Shadow's behavior was enough. They weren't alone. He reached for his sidearm, keeping it holstered but ready. "Vis Meg," he whispered, "show me." Shadow began moving again, more cautiously now, leading Rains toward what his instruments indicated was the crash site. The storm briefly lessened, visibility improving, and then Rains saw it. The downed Black Hawk emerged through the curtain of snowfall, like a wounded animal, its frame twisted in ways that metal should not bend. The tail section was relatively intact, but the cockpit looked as if something had punched through it from the inside out. No fire damage, no indication of explosion. Not the pattern of a mechanical failure or pilot error. Rains whispered into his mission recorder. Site located. Visual confirmation of target aircraft. No immediate visual on survivors. Approaching with caution. Standard procedure. Document everything. Create a record in case you don't return. As they drew closer, Shadow's demeanor changed. The dog began growling, a low, continuous sound that Rains had heard only twice before in their years together. Both times had preceded violence, but more concerning were the tracks Shadow had detected, strange, asymmetrical depressions leading away from the wreckage. Not human footprints, not animal tracks familiar to the region. Something else. The helicopter's emergency beacon, which should have been emitting a steady pulse, suddenly went silent. Rains checked his receiver. No malfunction on his end. The beacon had simply stopped transmitting, as if something had finally drained its battery. Or someone had deactivated it. "Fine timing," Rains muttered, approaching the aircraft with his weapon now drawn. The Black Hawk lay at an unnatural angle, its main rotor blades shattered, cockpit windows frosted opaque with ice. The port side door hung, open, twisted outward rather than inward. Something had forced its way out, not in. Rains circled the wreckage once, establishing a perimeter and checking for immediate threats before approaching the open door. Shadow stayed close, still growling intermittently. The dog's breath came in white clouds that dissipated quickly in the bitter cold. Temperature dropping, daylight fading, time working against them. "Delta 6 to base, initial assessment of crash site." Rains spoke into his calm, knowing the transmission wouldn't go through with the satellite link disabled, but recording locally. Aircraft shows non-standard damage patterns inconsistent with controlled or uncontrolled descent. No signs of fire or explosion. Investigating interior for survivors. He activated his tactical light and aimed it into the helicopter's cabin. The beam cut through darkness, revealing the horror within. The crew restraints were shredded, not cut with a tool, but torn apart by tremendous force. Blood had frozen in impossible arcs across the instrument panel, defying gravity in places, as if it had crystallized mid-splash. And most concerning of all, the co-pilot's seat was empty, its restraints similarly destroyed. Multiple blood patterns evident, Rains continued his recording. No bodies visible from entry point, proceeding inside. He signaled Shadow to stay, not wanting the dog inside until he'd cleared the cabin. The interior of the helicopter was colder than the outside air, if that were possible. Rains's breath crystallized instantly, tiny ice particles falling like miniature snow. He moved carefully through the cabin, checking each compartment, each storage area, finding nothing but standard equipment and more blood patterns. In the cockpit, the flight recorder still had power, its display flickering with static, but repeating one line of text over and over. External control interference. Rains had never seen that error message in any aircraft system. He reached for the communication panel, noting it wasn't damaged in the crash, but had been deliberately turned off. The switch was in the down position, emergency channels disabled. Someone had survived the crash and had intentionally silenced the helicopter's communications. Shadow whined from outside, a signal that set Rains' nerves on edge. The dog sensed something approaching. Rains quickened his search, moving to the cargo hold. There he found equipment that didn't match standard Black Hawk inventory. specialized containment gear, biological hazard suits, and monitoring equipment far beyond what a transport mission would require. One reinforced case had been forced open, its contents missing. Shadow barked once, a sharp, urgent sound that meant immediate threat. Rains moved quickly back toward the exit, but stopped when something caught his eye. A hidden compartment had been exposed by the crash impact, and wedged into the metal edge of the compartment was a military identification tag. Rains pried it loose, his hands suddenly unsteady as he read the inscription, Echo 9. The tag wasn't from this aircraft. It wasn't from this mission. Echo 9 had been a classified operation from months earlier, a mission that had gone dark with all hands presumed lost. James Maddox had been flying that day too. The official report cited catastrophic mechanical failure, no survivors, no recoverable wreckage. Rains's mind flashed to a classified briefing room 5 years earlier. Officers in unmarked uniforms discussing the Echo 9 incident, warnings about environmental contamination and cognitive hazards. Rains volunteering for something dangerous that required his unique background. Shadow barked again, more insistent this time. Rains pocketed the tag and exited the helicopter, weapon ready. The storm had intensified again, visibility down to mere meters. Shadow stood rigid, facing outward, sensing what Rains could not yet see. Rains activated his thermal imaging, scanning the perimeter. Nothing. Whatever Shadow detected was either too far away or wasn't emitting a heat signature the equipment could detect. Both possibilities were concerning. Returning to the cockpit, Rains connected a specialized data retrieval device to the flight recorder, copying its contents while leaving the original intact. Then he accessed the Black Hawk's backup systems, bypassing security with codes only senior command should have known. The system responded, allowing him to retrieve fragmented video from the aircraft's external cameras. The footage was corrupted, showing only intermittent images. The helicopter approaching what appeared to be some kind of remote research station. Instrumentation failure cascading across the pilot's console. The last clear image, something moving across the ice toward the camera, its form indistinct but somehow wrong in its proportions and movement. Further investigation revealed a hidden frequency on the communication system, a quarantine protocol channel not used since a classified operation in Siberia 15 years earlier. Rains attempted to send a message on this channel, but received only an automated response. Echo 9, containment failure confirmed, protocol Winter Shield activated. Winter Shield. Another code word Rains knew from briefings never officially acknowledged. The implication sent a chill through him, far colder than the Arctic air. Delta 6 to any station monitoring frequency Sierra 9, he transmitted using the emergency band. Request immediate clarification on Winter Shield protocol activation. Authentication code Lazarus 77 Echo. No response came through the static. Either the transmission wasn't reaching anyone, or no one was acknowledging receipt. Neither option was reassuring. The light was fading rapidly now, the short Arctic day surrendering to what would be a long, dangerous night. Rains needed to establish a defensive position and plan for the possibility that extraction wouldn't come in 6 hours as promised. He began gathering supplies from the helicopter, creating a more secure position using the aircraft's frame as a windbreak. Shadow remained agitated, moving in tight circles, constantly alert to threats Rains couldn't identify. The dog had been through combat zones, ambushes, and firefights without showing this level of anxiety. Whatever they faced here was something new, something Shadow's extensive training hadn't prepared him for. As Rains secured the site, he spotted something in the snow about 50 yards from the wreckage, a dark shape, partially buried by fresh snowfall. He approached cautiously, weapon ready, Shadow at his heels. It was a body. One of the helicopter's crew, the insignia identifying him as a crew chief. The man appeared to have crawled from the crash, his path marked by a dark trail of frozen blood in the snow. But examining the position more carefully, Rains noticed something disturbing. The man's hands were positioned as if he had been dragging himself back toward the helicopter, not away from it. What would make a severely injured man try to return to a crashed aircraft, rather than seek shelter or signal for help? Rains checked for signs of life, finding none. The body was frozen solid, death having occurred hours earlier. He documented the position and details in his recorder, then covered the remains with snow. Proper retrieval would have to wait for the extraction team. As he worked, Rains found a small waterproof case clutched in the dead man's hand. Breaking the frozen fingers to retrieve it felt wrong, but necessary. Inside was a scientific journal belonging to Dr. Imara Levesque, containing handwritten notes and observations. The final entry was dated 3 days earlier. It's not dormant as they thought. It's evolving. The sun dipped below the mountains, plunging the valley into premature darkness. Rains established a perimeter of motion sensors around the helicopter and prepared for a long night. Shadow stayed close, his usual professional demeanor replaced by something more primal. Fear. "What is it, boy?" Rains murmured, checking his weapon again. "What do you see that I can't?" Shadow's ears suddenly pricked forward, his body going rigid with tension. Through the swirling snow, Rains caught glimpses of movement. Multiple sets of eyes reflected his tactical light, surrounding them completely. The sensors hadn't triggered. Whatever was out there, it knew how to avoid standard detection equipment. "Delta 6 to base," Rains spoke quietly into his recorder. "Be advised, we are not alone at the crash site. Multiple unknown contacts, Shadow exhibiting extreme threat response, beginning defensive procedures." He paused, then added, "If you receive this and I don't make contact again, send a fully equipped containment team. This is not a standard recovery operation. Authentication code Lazarus 77 Echo. Rains out." The wind howled through the broken hull of the Black Hawk as the storm intensified. Rains positioned himself at the most defensible point, Shadow at his side, both facing outward toward the gathering darkness. The eyes had vanished, but the sense of being watched remained, prickling the skin at the back of his neck. Something moved through the snow, circling their position. Not approaching, just observing, assessing. The footfalls made no sound despite the crusted snow that should have crunched underfoot. Shadow's growl deepened. Rains checked the time. 5 hours until the extraction window opened. 5 hours to survive whatever circled in the darkness. 5 hours to discover the truth of what had happened here, and why Command had really sent him. The scientific journal lay open beside him, its pages fluttering in the bitter wind. Dr. Levesque's earlier entries detailed research on something discovered in the ice, something ancient that had begun to affect the research team in unpredictable ways. The words blurred as Rains tried to read in the fading light, but one phrase stood out clearly. "It communicates through patterns, changes in neural activity first, then physical manifestations." Maddox was right. This isn't first contact, it's recognition. Shadow's warning growl became a bark, sharp, urgent. Something was approaching from the darkness. Rains raised his weapon, tactical light illuminating swirling snow, and nothing more. But Shadow's reaction confirmed they faced an immediate threat. "Show yourself!" Rains called out, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "U.S. Navy SEAL, identify yourself." The only response was the howling wind and the creaking of the damaged helicopter. Then Shadow lunged forward, barking frantically at something just beyond the perimeter of light. Rains swung his tactical light in that direction and caught a glimpse of a figure, human in shape but moving with unnatural speed and grace through the deep snow. "Last warning," Rains called out. "Identify yourself or I will fire." The figure stopped just at the edge of visibility. Through the swirling snow, Rains could make out what appeared to be a standard cold-weather military parka, similar to his own. A survivor from the crash, but Shadow's aggressive posture suggested otherwise. "Help!" a voice called weakly from the darkness. A woman's voice, strained with pain or cold. "Please help me." Shadow's barking intensified, a clear warning. The dog had been trained to respond to injured personnel, to guide Rains to survivors. This aggressive display meant whatever stood at the perimeter wasn't what it appeared to be. "Step into the light," Rains ordered, hands visible. The figure took one step forward, then another. As it entered the full illumination of Rains' tactical light, he saw it was indeed a woman in a flight suit partially covered by a parka. Her face was pale, eyes wide, one arm clutched across her body as if injured. "Lieutenant Thalia Okafor," she said, her voice stronger now. "Co-pilot, something's happened to the others. Something's in the valley with us." Shadow continued to bark, lunging against Rains' command to stay. The dog's reaction was unmistakable. This wasn't a simple rescue scenario. Rains kept his weapon trained on the woman, studying her carefully. Her flight suit matched the helicopter's mission designation. Her name tag confirmed her identity. But something was wrong about her movements, her eyes. "What happened to the helicopter, Lieutenant?" Rains asked, not lowering his weapon. "Mechanical failure," she replied too quickly. "We lost control during the storm." "The flight recorder says otherwise," Rains countered. "External control interference. What does that mean?" The woman's expression changed subtly, a flicker of something crossing her features. "You accessed the flight recorder? That's against protocol for this mission." "What mission exactly?" Rains pressed. "This was logged as a routine transport." Okafor took another step forward, and Shadow's barking reached a frenzy. Rains noticed something he'd missed before, a strange pattern visible on the skin of her neck, just above her collar, like circuitry or veins, but with a geometric precision that wasn't natural. "Stay where you are," Rains ordered. "What happened to the others?" "They're coming," Okafor said, her voice changing, becoming monotone. "They've been waiting in the ice for so long, watching us, learning." Her eyes shifted, looking past Rains toward the helicopter. "You found it, didn't you? The tag, Echo 9. Rains' finger tensed on the trigger. This woman knew too much about a classified operation, and Shadow's reaction confirmed his suspicions. Something was very wrong with Lieutenant Okafor. "Who is Echo 9? Rains demanded. "Not who," Okafor replied, her eyes now fixed on his. "What?" A sudden gust of wind brought the storm to new intensity, momentarily blinding Rains with driving snow. When visibility returned seconds later, Okafor was gone. No footprints marked her departure. No motion sensors had triggered. She had simply vanished. Shadow's barking stopped, replaced by a low, continuous growl. The dog pressed against Rain's leg, a protective gesture they had developed in the combat situations. Whatever threat they faced, Shadow sensed it wasn't over. Rains checked the perimeter again, finding nothing. He retreated to the relative shelter of the helicopter's cabin, positioning himself to watch all approaches. 4.5 hours until the extraction window. The temperature was dropping rapidly, the storm showing no signs of abating. He reviewed what he knew: a classified mission disguised as routine transport, equipment for biological containment, a crew killed by something that tore through metal and flesh with equal ease, a survivor who appeared and disappeared impossibly, and a connection to Echo 9, an operation officially declared lost with all hands months earlier. The pieces didn't fit together, not completely, but they suggested something far beyond a simple crash recovery. This was containment, not rescue. And based on Shadow's reaction and what he'd seen, containment had failed catastrophically. Rains reached into his pack and withdrew one of the specialized injectors he'd brought. The blue fluid inside glowed faintly in the darkness. Maddox had given him these after Kandahar, when Rains had been exposed to something never fully explained in his mission briefing. Insurance, Maddox had called it. Protection against something that affected the mind first, the body second. Shadow's ears perked up, sensing something new. Not danger this time, but a sound below human hearing range. The dog tilted his head, listening intently. Rains felt it a moment later. Not a sound, but a vibration. The helicopter's frame was humming, metal resonating with some external frequency. Then the instrument panel, dead since his arrival, flickered to life. No power source should have remained functional after the crash and hours in the Arctic cold. Yet screens illuminated, displaying not standard flight information, but patterns. The same geometric designs Rains had observed on the rock formations and on Okafor's skin. Shadow whined, pressing closer to Rains. The vibrations intensified, and frost began forming on the interior surfaces of the cabin, not in random patterns, but in precise geometric shapes that grew in complexity before his eyes. Rains reached for Dr. Levesque's journal again, flipping through the pages with increasing urgency. The earlier entries described the research team discovering something in the ice, an artifact of unknown origin that emitted patterns similar to what he was seeing now, patterns that affected electronic equipment first, then began manifesting in the physical environment. The final pages contained sketches of the same patterns now growing across the helicopter's surfaces, accompanied by notes. "It's communicating, not in language as we understand it, but in structural changes to the environment itself, rewriting physical laws locally. The team is showing signs of neural reorganization, Maddox most affected. His brain scans show new structures forming. Rains closed the journal, his decision made. This was beyond his mission parameters, beyond standard operating procedure. He activated his emergency transmitter, overriding his earlier decision to maintain communications blackout. Delta 6 to any receiving station. Priority Alpha. Authentication code, Lazarus 77 Echo. Winter shield containment failure confirmed at crash site. Requesting immediate tactical containment team with Class 4 protocols. Site is compromised. Repeat, site is compromised. The transmission sent, but no acknowledgement came through. The storm might be blocking the signal, or something else might be interfering with communications. Either way, Rains was on his own until the extraction window, if extraction was, still coming at all. Shadow suddenly turned toward the helicopter's open door, hackles raised. Something was approaching again. Rains raised his weapon, tactical light cutting through the darkness. Multiple silhouettes moved through the swirling snow, surrounding the crash site. Not just one figure this time, but many, moving with that same unsettling synchronicity he'd observed with Okafor. Delta 6 to base, Rains whispered into his recorder. Multiple contacts converging on position. Shadow exhibiting extreme threat response, beginning defensive procedures. The wind howled through the broken hull as the storm intensified. Rains positioned himself at the most defensible point, Shadow at his side, both facing outward toward the gathering darkness. The real mission was becoming clearer with each passing minute. He hadn't been sent to recover survivors or data, but to assess whether containment had been breached. His unique background, what had happened to him in Kandahar, what had earned him the call sign Lazarus in whispered conversations among the brass, made him the perfect scout. Expendable, yet uniquely qualified. "We can see you, Lazarus," a voice called from the darkness. Not Okafor's voice now, but one Rains recognized with a chill. Captain James Maddox, a man officially declared dead months ago. "We've been waiting for you to join us." Shadow's growl deepened, the dog's muscles tensed to spring. Rains placed a calming hand on his partner's head. "Steady," he whispered. "We're not alone out here, but we're not finished either. From which mountain, valley, or city are you watching this story unfold? If you found yourself drawn into this dark mystery, consider subscribing for more tales where nothing is as it first appears. The truth, like that which waits in the Arctic darkness, is often hiding just beneath the surface. The silhouettes drew closer, their features becoming visible in the tactical light. Men and women in various states of military and scientific dress, all bearing the same strange patterns visible beneath their skin, all moving with the same unnatural coordination, and all wearing the vacant expressions of puppets controlled by unseen strings. At their center stood Captain James Maddox, unchanged from when Rains had last seen him, unchanged and yet fundamentally different. His eyes reflected the tactical light not with the red glow of normal retinas, but with geometric patterns that pulsed and shifted like living things. "The storm is just the beginning," Maddox said, his voice oddly resonant, as if multiple voices spoke in perfect unison. "What sleeps in the ice is finally awakening." The figures surrounding the downed helicopter made no move to attack, standing just at the edge of visibility like sentinels. Their presence formed a perfect circle around the crash site, geometric in its precision, unnatural in its stillness. "What do you want?" Rains called out, weapon still raised. "What happened to the real Maddox?" The figure wearing James Maddox's face tilted its head at an impossible angle. "We are real, Lazarus, more real than we were before. The patterns have completed us." Rains tightened his grip on his weapon. Shadow's growl deepened beside him, the dog sensing the wrongness of the entities surrounding them. These weren't people anymore, not entirely. Something had changed them, rewired them at a fundamental level. "The crash," Rains pressed. "Was it deliberate?" "A necessary convergence," Maddox replied, his voice still carrying that strange multi-tonal quality. "The vessel discovered us as the ice thinned. We discovered them in return." The storm intensified again, snow swirling in complex patterns that mirrored the frost formations inside the helicopter. Not random, Rains realized with growing unease. Deliberate, communicative. And what about Echo 9? Rains asked. The operation from 3 months ago? A ripple passed through the gathered figures, like a wave of invisible energy. Maddox's expression shifted subtly. The first contact, incomplete, premature. Your people were unprepared for communion. Before Rains could question further, one of the figures broke formation, stepping forward with jerky, uncoordinated movements. Unlike the others, this one showed signs of internal struggle, fighting against whatever controlled them. Rains! The figure gasped, and he recognized Lieutenant Okafor again, the co-pilot he'd encountered earlier. Don't listen. They're in our heads, changing us. The patterns are spreading. She clutched her head, the geometric markings visible on her skin pulsing with internal light. Find the case, the blue compound. It slows them down. Maddox moved with blurring speed, reaching Okafor and grasping her arm. The lieutenant screamed, not in pain, but in despair, as the patterns on Maddox's skin seemed to flow between them, reinforcing those already spreading across her body. The transition requires acceptance, Maddox said calmly, still looking at Rains rather than at the struggling woman. Resistance prolongs the integration. Rains took advantage of the distraction, firing a specialized flare directly upward, not a call for help, which wouldn't come for hours yet, but a thermal countermeasure that burst 100 meters overhead, temporarily blinding both thermal and visual sensors. In the moment of confusion, he grabbed Shadow and retreated inside the helicopter, slamming the damaged door shut behind them. They're coming, Okafor had said. Whoever or whatever they were, they'd already arrived, wearing the bodies of the crew and research team like empty vessels. Rains barricaded the door with cargo netting and equipment, creating a temporary barrier that wouldn't hold for long. Shadow positioned himself facing the cockpit entrance, alert for threats from that direction. The proximity sensors outside had gone silent, either disabled or, more likely, ignored by entities that understood human technology well enough to circumvent it. Rains checked his watch. 3 hours until the extraction window, and no guarantee that help would actually come. He returned to the cockpit, searching for anything useful among the instrumentation. The patterns on the screens had continued evolving, growing more complex by the minute. He recognized elements from Dr. Lévesque's journal sketches, but these were more advanced, more structured. The patterns weren't random. They formed a coherent system, a language of sorts. Something thumped against the exterior hull, hard enough to rock the damaged helicopter. Then another impact and another. Systematic, testing the structural integrity of their shelter. Shadow barked once, then fell silent, ears pricked towards something Rains couldn't hear. The dog's hackles raised again, but his posture had changed from aggression to fear. Whatever approached wasn't just a threat. It was something beyond Shadow's training or experience. The temperature inside the helicopter plummeted suddenly, dropping 20 degrees in seconds. Rains's breath crystallized in front of him, forming not random patterns, but geometric shapes that held for moments before dissipating. The metal frame of the aircraft creaked and groaned, expanding and contracting as if subjected to impossible temperature variations. Another impact, stronger this time. The barricaded door bulged inward but held, for now. Rains returned to the cargo area, searching for anything that might help their situation. The specialized containment gear he'd found earlier suggested the mission had been prepared for something biological or chemical. He examined the hazard suits more carefully, noting they weren't standard NBC protection, but something more advanced, designed for unknown threats. Behind a damaged panel, Rains discovered a hidden compartment containing specialized equipment, including an array of syringes filled with the same luminescent blue fluid he carried in his own kit. The labels confirmed his suspicions. Echo 9 inhibitor, neural pathway protection for emergency use only. The same compound Maddox had given him after Kandahar, the same substance Okafor had mentioned before. Maddox silenced her. Shadow's warning growl drew Rains back to the present. The barricade was beginning to give way, the door bending at an impossible angle as something pressed against it with inhuman strength. Rains made a quick decision, grabbing one of the syringes and injecting its contents into his forearm. The effect was immediate, a cold clarity spreading through his mind, sharpening his senses. The compound wasn't just protective, he realized. It was enhancing. specifically designed to counteract whatever influence the patterns exerted. "Come on, boy," he called to Shadow, moving toward the cockpit. The windshield was shattered enough to create an exit point if they needed it, but going outside meant facing the entities that had once been the helicopter crew, beings that now moved with singular purpose and unnatural abilities. Before he could reach the cockpit, the barricaded door gave way completely. Captain James Maddox stepped through the opening, his movements fluid and precise despite the twisted metal edges that should have impeded him. The patterns beneath his skin glowed brightly now, pulsing in rhythm with the displays on the helicopter's instruments. "You know what this is, Lazarus," Maddox said, his voice eerily calm. "You've carried it inside you since Kandahar, the first seed, the beginning of communion." Rains raised his weapon, aiming directly at what had once been his friend. "James died 3 months ago, didn't he? During Echo 9? "Bodies die," Maddox replied. "Patterns endure, transfer, evolve." He took another step forward, ignoring the weapon trained on him. "We found something in the ice, something ancient, something waiting. Or perhaps it found us." The distinction became irrelevant once communion began. Shadow lunged suddenly, catching Maddox off guard and knocking him backward. The dog's teeth found purchase in the entity's arm, but instead of blood, a strange luminescent fluid leaked from the wound, forming patterns on the floor that writhed with apparent sentience. Maddox showed no pain, merely looking at Shadow with something like curiosity. "The canine resists integration. Interesting. Its neural pathways differ from human architecture." Rains used the distraction to put distance between them, grabbing Shadow's collar and pulling him back. "Stay clear of it," he ordered. The dog obeyed, retreating but keeping his body between Rains and the entity. Through the open door, Rains could see the other figures still maintaining their perfect circle around the crash site. Not approaching, not attacking, waiting. "What do you want?" Rains demanded, keeping his weapon trained on Maddox. "To complete what began in Kandahar," Maddox replied. "You were the first successful integration, Lazarus, the first to die and return, carrying the seed patterns within you. But you resist full communion. The compound in your blood suppresses the network connections." The revelation hit Rains like a physical blow. The gaps in his memory after Kandahar, the weeks in quarantine, the special attention from high command, and the isolation from his fellow operators afterward. He hadn't just been injured in Kandahar, he had died, and whatever had brought him back had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. "The others from Echo 9, Rains said, thinking quickly. "They didn't resist?" "Some did briefly," Maddox confirmed. "Their integration was therefore imperfect. Yours could be complete. You were designed for this, Lazarus. Your neural architecture is already partially adapted." Shadow growled again, sensing Rains's internal conflict. The dog pressed against his leg, a physical reminder of connection, of loyalty uncompromised by whatever waited in the patterns. Rains made his decision, activating the emergency frequency on his comm unit. "Delta 6 to any station monitoring frequency Sierra 9. Winter Shield containment breach confirmed. Site compromise total. Requesting immediate Protocol 0 authorization." Protocol 0. The last resort. Complete sterilization of the site from the air. No survivors expected or intended. Maddox tilted his head, those inhuman eyes studying Rains with renewed interest. "Your loyalty to failed systems persists despite what they've done to you. Curious. The patterns should have shown you the truth by now." "And what truth is that?" Rains asked, buying time. If anyone was monitoring the emergency frequency, Protocol 0 would bring hellfire down on this entire valley, but he needed to be sure it was necessary, needed to understand exactly what they faced. "That your military found us decades ago," Maddox said. "The first site was discovered in 1982, Siberia. The patterns were dormant then, preserved in ice for thousands of years. Your scientists studied them, tried to weaponize them, tried to control what they could never understand. The revelation aligned with fragments Rains had heard over the years. Black projects with obscure code names, research teams that disappeared without explanation. The quarantine protocols developed after incidents never officially acknowledged. Kandahar wasn't an accident," Maddox continued. "You were deliberately exposed, a test subject, the perfect candidate with the perfect neural mapping to receive the patterns without immediate rejection." Shadow whined, sensing Rains's growing unease. The dog had been with him since before Kandahar, had been quarantined alongside him afterward. Had Shadow been part of the experiment too? A control subject perhaps, or another test vector? Why tell me this? Rains demanded, finger tightening on the trigger. Because communion requires understanding, Maddox replied, and your integration remains incomplete while you cling to false narratives. We are not invaders, Lazarus. We are evolution, the next step, happening now, all around you. Outside, the circle of figures had begun to move, not toward the helicopter, but in a slow, synchronized rotation. The patterns visible on their skin pulsed in unison, and the snow between them began to form intricate geometric shapes on the ground, visible even through the storm. Rains felt a pressure building inside his skull, a familiar sensation he'd experienced in the days after Kandahar. The blue compound was fighting it, keeping the influence at bay, but he could sense something vast trying to connect with his consciousness, something ancient and patient and utterly alien to human thought. The chopper that brought you here won't return, Maddox said with certainty. The storm is ours now. The patterns extend beyond this valley, spreading through communication networks, through minds prepared to receive them. Your command knows what's happening. They've known since the beginning. Shadow barked suddenly, a warning signal. Through the cockpit windshield, Rain saw new lights approaching through the storm. Not the extraction helicopter, still hours away if it was coming at all, but ground transport. Snowmobiles, their headlights cutting through the swirling white. Maddox smiled, the expression unnervingly perfect on his transformed face. More vessels arrive, more patterns to complete. Rains made his choice. If the entities could control the storm, as Maddox claimed, if they were spreading beyond the valley through networks and mines, then containment was already compromised. His mission parameters had shifted from assessment to survival. Shadow, utvai, he commanded in Norwegian. Find the way out. The dog immediately moved toward the damaged cockpit, sniffing at the twisted metal and broken glass. While Shadow searched for an escape route, Rains kept his weapon trained on Maddox, who made no move to attack or retreat. You cannot stop what has already begun, Maddox said. The ice is thinned. What slept beneath for millennia is awakening. The patterns are spreading, world to world, mind to mind. Communion is inevitable. Maybe, Rains acknowledged, but not today, and not through me. Shadow barked once, indicating he'd found a viable exit through the shattered windshield. The approaching snowmobiles were closer now, their engines audible even over the howling wind. Rains had minutes at most before new players entered the equation, likely assets deployed by command to assess the situation, or to ensure no witnesses remained. Rains backed toward the cockpit, keeping Maddox in his sights. The entity made no move to stop him, watching with that unsettling calm that suggested it knew something Rains didn't. They sent you because you were already one of us, Maddox said as Rains reached the cockpit. Your communion began in Kandahar. It merely awaits completion. Then they made a mistake, Rains replied, preparing to follow Shadow through the broken windshield. I never was good at following the program. He fired 3 rounds into the instrument panel, destroying the displays showing the evolving patterns. The screens shattered, sparks flying, but instead of dying, the patterns leapt from the broken glass to the metal frame of the helicopter itself, etching themselves into the surface like living circuitry. Maddox merely smiled again. The medium is irrelevant. The patterns endure. Shadow squeezed through the narrow opening first, waiting on the other side for Rains. The dog's posture was alert, but controlled, indicating no immediate threats outside the aircraft. Rains followed, the twisted metal edges catching on his cold-weather gear as he forced his way through. Once outside, Rains could see the approaching snowmobiles more clearly, 4 vehicles, military-grade, with riders in white Arctic gear that obscured their identities. Not extraction, then? Something else? The circling figures ignored. Rains and Shadow, continuing their slow, ritualistic movement around the crash site. The patterns in the snow had grown more complex, forming concentric rings of geometric precision that pulsed with a light that seemed to come from beneath the ice itself. Shadow growled low, detecting a new threat. From behind a ridge of ice-crusted stone emerged Lieutenant Okafor, moving with the jerky, uncoordinated motions of someone fighting for control of their own body. The patterns beneath her skin were less pronounced than those on Maddox and the others, suggesting her integration was incomplete. Rains, she called, her voice strained but her own. "The cave, North Ridge. There's equipment there. Data. Truth." Maddox emerged from the helicopter behind them, his movements fluid and unhurried. "The transition is painful only when resisted," he said, looking at Okafor with something like pity. "Acceptance brings clarity." Okafor's body convulsed, the patterns beneath her skin flaring brightly, then subsiding as she reasserted control. "They're lying," she gasped. "Not evolution, invasion, replacing us, using us." The snowmobiles were closing fast now, perhaps a minute away. Rains had to make a choice, quickly. Trust Okafor's fractured warning and head for the cave, or attempt to intercept the incoming team and warn them of the threat. Shadow made the decision for him, tugging at Rains's sleeve and then moving purposefully toward the North Ridge. The dog had never steered him wrong before. Rains followed, keeping low and using the swirling snow as cover. Behind them, Maddox made no move to pursue. Instead, he rejoined the circle of transformed humans, their synchronized movement speeding up as the snowmobiles approached. The patterns in the snow pulsed more intensely, and the storm itself seemed to respond, snow swirling in the same geometric formations visible on the entity's skin. Rains and Shadow reached the base of the North Ridge as the snowmobiles arrived at the crash site. Through the driving snow, Rains could see the riders dismount, their movements precise and coordinated. Not rescuers, then. Already transformed, already part of whatever communion Maddox had described. The cave entrance was partially obscured by snow, but Shadow found it easily, his acute senses detecting what human eyes missed. Rains followed the dog into the narrow opening, leaving the storm and the growing confrontation behind. Inside, the temperature was marginally warmer, the howling wind reduced to a distant moan. Rains activated his tactical light, illuminating a space that was clearly not a natural formation. The walls were too smooth, the angles too precise. Like the rock formations he'd observed earlier, this cave showed signs of deliberate design beneath centuries or millennia of natural erosion. And it had been recently occupied. Equipment cases bearing military markings lined one wall. A portable generator, now silent, sat in a corner. Communication gear, specialized scientific instruments, and survival supplies indicated this had been an established outpost before the helicopter crash. Shadow moved deeper into the cave, following some scent that caught his attention. Rains checked the equipment first, finding most of it powered down or damaged. Someone had deliberately disabled the communications array, smashing key components beyond repair. On a folding table, Rains found a laptop in hibernation mode, still drawing minimal power. He activated it, finding it unlocked and recently used. The screen displayed a satellite map of the region with multiple sites marked in red. One was their current position, others spread across Alaska, Siberia, northern Canada, and Greenland. All locations with permanent ice cover, at least until recent climate changes. Shadow barked from deeper in the cave. Rains followed the sound, tactical light illuminating a narrow passage that opened into a second chamber. There, propped against the far wall, he found Lieutenant Thalia Okafor, her breathing shallow, her skin pale with advanced hypothermia. Unlike the figure that had spoken to him outside, this Okafor showed no signs of the geometric patterns beneath her skin. Her eyes were clouded white, her lips blue with cold, but when Rains approached, she reacted with recognition. "Master Chief," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You found it." "Lieutenant Okafor?" Rains knelt beside her, checking for injuries. Her flight suit was torn and bloodied, one arm clearly broken, but she had managed to bind it with strips of fabric. "What happened? Who was that outside wearing your face?" "Not what. Who?" she corrected, echoing what the other Okafor had said earlier, but with different meaning. "Echo 9, not a mission designation, a containment classification. Entity 9, 9th documented encounter." Rains administered emergency first aid, wrapping Okafor in a thermal blanket from his kit and checking her core temperature. Dangerously low, but she was conscious and coherent. A fighter. "The helicopter crash," he prompted. "Was it deliberate?" Okafor nodded weakly. "We found something during a routine survey, something the ice had been hiding. The instruments went crazy first. Then the crew started seeing things, patterns, everywhere. Captain Corey tried to turn us around, but by then it was too late. The controls stopped responding. External override, but not from base. from inside our heads. Shadow positioned himself at the chamber entrance, alert for threats from the passage. The dog's body language indicated they were momentarily safe, but his tension suggested that could change at any moment. After the crash, I was the only one still mobile, Okafor continued. The others were already changing. I could see it spreading under their skin. I made it here, to our forward operating base. Tried to send a warning, but someone had already destroyed the comms. Then I saw her, stepping out of the storm, wearing my face, speaking with my voice. A duplicate? Rains asked, struggling to comprehend. Not exactly, Okafor whispered. More like a projection. The patterns, they get in your head first. Read your memories, your knowledge. Then they start manipulating physical matter, creating external versions while the internal changes progress. She gestured weakly toward a case near the cave wall. That's what I was sent to find, what this was all about. The research team found it 3 months ago, before they went dark. Echo 9, the artifact. Rains approached the case cautiously, Shadow staying close to his side. The container was military grade, designed for hazardous materials, with multiple security systems, all disabled or broken. The lid was partially open, revealing a faint glow from within. Don't touch it directly, Okafor warned. That's how it starts. Skin contact initiates the pattern transfer. Rains used a tool from his kit to fully open the case, revealing its contents. Inside was an object unlike anything he'd ever seen, approximately the size of a basketball, but with a geometry that seemed to shift as he looked at it, angles changing despite the object remaining physically static. Its surface glowed with the same patterns he'd observed on the transformed crew, pulsing in complex sequences that hurt his eyes to follow. What is it? Rains asked, careful to maintain distance. No one knows for sure, Okafor replied. The initial research team called it a node, a connection point. They found dozens like it beneath the ice as it melted, all inactive until they brought the first one to the surface. That's when the patterns started appearing, first on instruments, then in dreams, then on skin. Shadow growled low, a warning. Something was approaching the cave. You're him, aren't you? Okafor asked suddenly. Lazarus Protocol, the only one who survived direct contact. The question triggered another fractured memory from after Kandahar. A quarantine facility, his body covered in the same patterns now afflicting the helicopter crew. Military doctors in hazmat suits. Someone saying, the symbiosis is stabilizing. He might be the bridge we need. How do you know about that? Rains demanded. That operation was classified beyond top secret. It's all connected, Okafor said, her strength fading. Kandahar wasn't what you were told. The insurgents you encountered, they'd found something in those caves, something like this. Your team wasn't sent to eliminate terrorists. You were sent to secure the artifact. But it was active by the time you arrived. It affected you all. Only you survived the initial exposure. Shadow's growl deepened, his attention fixed on the cave entrance. The approaching threat was getting closer. The patterns on your skin faded, Okafor continued. The others thought you'd beaten it, or it had failed to fully integrate. But it didn't fail. It adapted, went dormant, waited. That's why they sent me here, Rains realized. Not because I'm expendable, because I'm already carrying it. Don't let them take you back, Okafor whispered urgently, gripping his arm with surprising strength. The mission was never recovery. It was containment. Your command wants what's in your head, the dormant patterns. They think they can control it, weaponize it. They've been trying for decades. Shadow barked once, the signal for immediate threat. Rains drew his weapon, positioning himself to defend both Okafor and the passage entrance. How do we stop it? He asked. The integration, the patterns, all of it? Okafor's eyes drifted to the specialized injector Rains had brought. That only slows it down. There's only one way to stop it completely. Her gaze shifted to his weapon. If I start to change, if the patterns appear, you have to end it. Promise me. Before Rains could respond, Shadow lunged toward the passage, intercepting a figure that emerged from the darkness. Not Maddox or one of the transformed crew, but a soldier in full tactical gear, weapon raised. Shadow's attack caught the intruder off guard, knocking them backward. Rains moved instantly, using the distraction to disarm the soldier with practiced efficiency. The tactical helmet concealed their identity, but as Rains pinned them against the cave wall, he could see no signs of the patterns beneath the exposed skin at their neck. "Identify yourself," Rains demanded, weapon pressed to the soldier's throat. "Commander Sadira Vega," a familiar voice replied. "Stand down, Master Chief. I'm here to extract you." Rains maintained his hold, but eased the pressure slightly. "Authentication code? Lazarus 77 Echo," Vega replied without hesitation. "Your call for Protocol 0 was received. Extraction team deployed instead. We have less than 30 minutes before this entire valley becomes a fire pit." Shadow maintained his aggressive stance, unconvinced. The dog had been trained to recognize friend from foe by scent and body language, and something about Vega was triggering his suspicion. "Show me your eyes," Rains ordered, remembering the distinctive look of the transformed crew. Vega removed her helmet, revealing familiar features unmarked by the telltale patterns. Her eyes were clear, showing only professional focus and urgency. "Satisfied, Master Chief? Now we need to move. The others are securing the perimeter, but those things are converging on our position." Rains released her, but Shadow remained alert, his posture indicating continued suspicion. The dog had never reacted this way to Vega before. "Lieutenant Okafor needs immediate medical evacuation," Rains said, gesturing toward the injured pilot. "Hypothermia, broken arm, possible internal injuries." Vega glanced at Okafor, her expression unreadable. "We'll get her out. What about the package? Were you able to locate it?" The question raised Rains' suspicion. His official mission brief had mentioned nothing about a package, only assessing the crash. Site and retrieving flight data. "What package?" he asked, testing. "Don't play games, Master Chief," Vega snapped. "The artifact, Echo 9. Command wants it secured and transported back to base for analysis." Exactly what Okafor had warned against. Rains made a split-second decision, keeping his expression neutral. "Haven't found it yet. Must have been destroyed in the crash or taken by whatever's out there." Shadow's ears perked up at the lie, the dog sensing the shift in Rains' demeanor. Vega's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing. "We need to move now," she said after a moment. "Extraction point is 2 clicks east. Transport's waiting, but not for long. This entire area is about to become very hot." Rains helped Okafor to her feet, supporting her weight. "Can you walk, Lieutenant?" "If the alternative is staying here, I can run," Okafor managed, her determination evident despite her weakened state. Vega led them back through the passage toward the cave entrance, communicating via radio with her team outside. "Ventura. Actual to all points. Package not secured. Preparing to move primary assets to extraction. Maintain perimeter." At the cave entrance, Rains could see 4 more soldiers in tactical gear, securing the approach. Weapons trained outward toward the storm. Beyond them, the circle of transformed crew members continued their ritualistic movement around the crash site, seemingly unconcerned with the military presence. "They're not attacking," Rains observed. "Why?" "Unknown," Vega replied. "They've been watching us since we arrived. No hostile movements, no approach attempts. It's like they're waiting for something." Or someone, Rains thought, remembering Maddox's words about completion and communion. The blue compound in his system was fighting whatever connection the pattern sought to establish, but he could feel it there, a presence at the edge of his consciousness, patient and persistent. The snowmobiles were positioned for quick departure, engines idling. Vega directed 2 of her team to assist Okafor, while the others maintained defensive positions. The storm had intensified again, visibility reduced to mere meters, but through the swirling white, Rains could see the geometric patterns forming in the snow itself, spreading outward from the circle of transformed humans. "The storm isn't natural," Rains told Vega as they prepared to move. "They're controlling it somehow, using it." "All the more reason to get out now," Vega replied. "Protocol 0 activates in 26 minutes. Nothing survives." Shadow suddenly froze, hackles raised, staring at something beyond the defensive perimeter. Rains followed the dog's gaze and saw Captain Maddox standing alone, separated from the circle, watching them with those inhuman eyes. "James Maddox," Vega murmured, recognizing him despite the distance and poor visibility. "He was declared KIA 3 months ago with the rest of Echo 9 team." "That's not Maddox anymore," Rains said grimly. "Whatever's wearing his face, it's something else entirely." As if hearing them despite the distance and howling wind, Maddox smiled and raised a hand in greeting. The gesture was casual, almost friendly, but carried an undertone of certainty that chilled Rains more than the Arctic air. "We should move," Vega urged, clearly unsettled by Maddox's appearance. "Now." They mounted the snowmobiles, Okafor secured behind one of Vega's team, Rains with Shadow in a specialized sidecar attachment designed for K9 units. The engines roared as they accelerated away from the cave, heading east toward the extraction point. Rains glanced back once, seeing Maddox still standing alone, watching them leave. The entity made no move to pursue, no attempt to stop them. That confidence was perhaps the most disturbing element of all. The snowmobiles carved through deep snow, following a route Vega's team had marked during their ingress. The storm seemed to fight them, wind and snow lashing with increasing fury as they distanced themselves from the crash site. Not random weather, Rains knew now, but a directed force, another manifestation of whatever intelligence drove the patterns. Shadow kept his body pressed close to Rains, the dog's heightened senses alert for threats hidden by the storm. Twice he barked warnings about obstacles in their path that the riders hadn't seen, saving them from potential crashes in the limited visibility. 5 minutes into their journey, Rains noticed something alarming. The patterns he'd observed in the snow around the crash site were appearing here as well. Geometric formations emerging from the fresh powder, as if drawn by invisible hands. The influence was spreading beyond the immediate area, perhaps throughout the entire valley. Okafor had been right. This wasn't containment anymore. It was outbreak. The extraction point appeared through the storm, a relatively flat area where a helicopter could land briefly. No aircraft waited for them yet, but Vega assured them it was inbound, delayed only by the extreme weather conditions. As the team secured the perimeter, Rains helped Okafor to the relative shelter of an overhanging rock formation. The lieutenant's condition had deteriorated during the journey, her skin waxy and pale, her breathing increasingly labored. "It's starting," she whispered, pulling aside her collar to reveal the faint beginnings of geometric patterns spreading across her collarbone. "I can feel it in my head, the pressure, the patterns trying to connect." "Fight it!" Rains urged, preparing another dose of the blue compound. "This will help slow the progression." Okafor pushed his hand away weakly. "Save it for yourself. You're the key to all this, don't you see? What happened to you in Kandahar, what's dormant inside you, that's what they really want. The military, the patterns, both sides." Shadow growled low, alerting to an approaching presence. Commander Vega appeared through the swirling snow, her expression grim. "Extraction's been delayed," she announced. "Weather's too severe for approach. They'll try again in 10 minutes. "That cuts it close to Protocol Zero," Rains noted. "Too close," Vega agreed. "We might need to find better shelter and ride it out. There's a research station about a click north that might survive the strike." Okafor's eyes widened at the mention of the research station. "No," she gasped. "That's where it started, where the first team found the artifacts. It's compromised." Vega's attention snapped to Okafor, her expression sharpening. "How do you know that, Lieutenant? That information wasn't in your mission brief." Before Okafor could respond, Shadow's posture changed dramatically, his body rigid with alarm. The dog turned in a complete circle, growling at threats from all directions. Rains scanned the perimeter, seeing nothing through the snow, but trusting Shadow's senses implicitly. "Something's coming," he warned. "Multiple contacts." Vega signaled her team to defensive positions, weapons ready. The storm abruptly intensified, snow swirling in tight geometric formations that mimicked the patterns Rains had seen beneath transformed skin. Then, emerging from the white void, came figures moving with that now familiar synchronicity. Not just the helicopter crew this time, but others in research gear, military uniforms, even indigenous cold weather clothing. Dozens of them surrounding the extraction point in a closing circle. "They followed us," one of Vega's team called out unnecessarily. "No," Rains realized. "They were already here, waiting." At the front of the approaching figures stood Maddox, his expression calm, almost compassionate. Beside him walked a perfect duplicate of Commander Sadira Vega, identical in every detail to the woman standing with Rains, except for the glowing patterns visible beneath her skin. The real Vega inhaled sharply at the sight of her doppelganger. "What the hell is this?" "Communion requires understanding," Maddox called, his voice carrying effortlessly through the storm. "The patterns must be complete, the network whole. Shadow's growl deepened, but now the dog was looking not at the approaching figures, but at Commander Vega herself. Rains noticed it too late, the subtle shift in her posture, the slight change in her breathing pattern. Vega turned to him, her expression transforming from confusion to serene certainty. When she pulled back her collar, the geometric patterns were already spreading across her skin, pulsing with internal light. "The integration began the moment we landed, Lazarus," she said, her voice taking on that multitonal quality he'd heard from Maddox. "The patterns recognized prepared vessels. Your command sent us knowing what would happen, sacrifices for communion." The other members of Vega's team were showing signs of the same transformation, the patterns appearing on exposed skin, their movements becoming synchronized with the approaching circle. Only Rain's shadow and the rapidly fading Okafor remained unaffected. "Why?" Rains demanded, backing away, keeping Shadow close and supporting Okafor. "What does any of this achieve?" "Evolution," Vega replied simply. "What sleeps in the ice is the next step, has always been the next step, waiting for humanity to be ready. Some in your military understood this decades ago. They've been preparing, selecting candidates, creating optimal neural architectures for integration." "Candidates like me," Rains said, the pieces finally connecting. "Kandahar was a test. This is another." "The final test," Vega confirmed. "Your communion will complete the network, bridge worlds, begin the true transformation." The circle of transformed humans tightened around them, closing all avenues of escape. In the distance, Rains heard the approaching sound of helicopter rotors, barely audible over the howling storm. Extraction arriving, but too late to matter. Shadow's eyes began to glow with the same patterns visible on the transformed humans, the light pulsing beneath his fur in geometric precision. The dog wasn't just Rains's partner, he realized with shock. Shadow had been part of the experiment from the beginning, the first successful symbiotic bridge between military technology and whatever consciousness drove the patterns. "They never wanted weapons," Rains said, understanding dawning. "They wanted understanding. We were the hostile force, not them." Okafor collapsed against him, her strength finally giving out. The patterns beneath her skin flared briefly, then stabilized into a complex geometric network. "Make your choice, Lazarus," she whispered, "but make it yours, not theirs, not commands, not the patterns." Above them, the extraction helicopter appeared through the storm, rotors fighting the unnatural winds. It wouldn't land, couldn't land in these conditions. Protocol Zero would activate in minutes, turning the valley into an inferno that nothing should survive. But as the transformed circle closed around them, as Shadow's eyes glowed with ancient patterns that predated human civilization, Rains understood that fire wouldn't be enough. The patterns had already spread beyond this valley, beyond this moment. The communion Maddox spoke of had already begun. The ground beneath them suddenly trembled, ice cracking with sounds like artillery fire. The circle of transformed humans didn't react with alarm, but with something like reverence, their synchronous movement changing to a new pattern. The ice beneath the Black Hawk helicopter split open completely, revealing something massive rising from the depths. Not a natural formation, but a structure of impossible geometry, its surface etched with the same patterns now visible on human skin, on Shadow's fur, in the swirling snow itself. "What is it?" Rains asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Home," Maddox replied simply. "The beginning, the end, the bridge between what humanity was and what it will become." Where is your mind drifting as this story pulls you deeper? If you find yourself haunted by the mysteries beneath the ice, consider subscribing for the conclusion that reveals what truly awaits Master Chief Rains as he faces the ultimate choice between humanity's past and its transformed future. As the ancient structure emerged fully from the ice, its patterns illuminated the valley with cold light that cast no shadows. The extraction helicopter wavered in the turbulent air above, unable to approach, unable to retreat. Shadow moved forward, drawn to the structure, his transformation progressing with each step. And Rains, standing at the threshold between worlds, felt the dormant patterns within him awakening at last, responding to a call that had waited millennia to be answered. The extraction helicopter hovered desperately above the valley, buffeted by winds that defied natural patterns. Inside the cockpit, the pilot fought controls that responded with increasing reluctance, instruments flickering with geometric patterns that shouldn't exist in military technology. Below, the ancient structure continued its emergence from the fractured ice, rising like a sentinel from Earth's distant past. Its surface glowed with the same patterns now visible on the transformed humans surrounding Rains, patterns that pulsed in perfect synchronization with the storm itself. Rains stood at the focal point of forces beyond human comprehension, supporting the fading Lieutenant Okafor with one arm while Shadow pressed against his leg, the dog's eyes luminous with the same unearthly light that emanated from the structure. "Make your choice," Okafor whispered again, her voice barely audible above the storm. "But make it yours. Communion or resistance. Integration or defiance." The pressure building inside Rains's skull suggested the choice might already be made, the dormant patterns implanted in Kandahar awakening despite the blue compound in his bloodstream. The transformed Commander Vega extended her hand, an invitation rather than a demand. "The transition is easier with acceptance, Lazarus. Your unique neural architecture makes you the perfect bridge." Shadow whined, torn between his loyalty to Rains and the pull of whatever consciousness now flowed through him. The dog's transformation had stabilized, the patterns beneath his fur pulsing in a rhythm different from those of the transformed humans. Not fully integrated, but not fully resistant either. A third state, a new possibility. In that moment of clarity, Rains made his decision, not the choice Command expected, not the surrender the patterns demanded, something else entirely. He gently lowered Okafor to the ground, ensuring she was as comfortable as possible in the bitter cold. Then he straightened, facing Maddox and the circle of transformed entities. "I want to understand," Rains said, his voice steady. "Not surrender, not fight, understand." Maddox tilted his head, those inhuman eyes studying Rains with renewed interest. "Understanding is the beginning of communion, Lazarus, the first step toward integration." "Then show me," Rains challenged. "Not through force or invasion. Show me what you truly are, what you truly want." The circle of transformed humans parted, creating a path toward the emerging structure. Shadow moved first, leading the way with cautious steps, looking back to ensure Rains followed. The dog's behavior had shifted from fear to something like purpose, as if he'd found equilibrium between his training and the new consciousness flowing through him. Rains followed, aware that the extraction helicopter still circled above, that Protocol Zero would activate in minutes. Behind him, he could hear Vega ordering her transformed team to retrieve Okafor, to bring her along. The lieutenant was too weak to resist, but her eyes met Rains's with understanding. Whatever happened next, they faced it together. As they approached the structure, its true scale became apparent. What had appeared from a distance to be perhaps the size of a small building was revealed as merely the uppermost portion of something vastly larger, its full extent still buried beneath the ice. The visible section rose nearly 30 meters above the surface, a perfect geometric form that seemed to shift as Rains looked at it, angles changing despite the structure remaining physically static. The storm abated around the structure, creating an unnatural calm at its perimeter. Snow fell in geometric patterns, accumulating in formations that mirrored those on the structure's surface. Shadow reached the base first, stopping at what appeared to be an entrance, not a door in any conventional sense, but an opening that formed as the patterns on the surface rearranged themselves, flowing like liquid metal to create an archway of perfect proportions. Maddox stopped beside Rains, gesturing toward the entrance. "What you seek lies within. What seeks you awaits." The military part of Rains's training screamed warnings about entering unknown structures without securing the perimeter, about walking into what could only be described as a trap. But the part of him that had changed in Kandahar, the part that had died and returned carrying something new, recognized this moment for what it was. Not an ending, but a beginning. "Shadow, with me," Rains commanded, and the dog moved to his side, their partnership transcending whatever changes flowed through them both. Together, they entered the structure, followed by Maddox, Vega, and the transformed team carrying Okafor. Inside, the temperature was neither warm nor cold, existing in a state of perfect equilibrium that human bodies recognized as comfort. The interior walls glowed with the same patterns visible outside, but here they moved with greater complexity, flowing in sequences that seemed almost narrative in nature. "They're telling a story," Okafor murmured, her strength returning slightly in the Z, controlled environment. Look at how they connect, how they build on each other. Rains helped her stand, noticing that the patterns beneath her skin had stabilized, no longer spreading but not receding either. A stalemate between integration and resistance, similar to what he observed in Shadow. The passage led deeper into the structure, descending below the surface. As they walked, the walls around them displayed increasingly complex pattern sequences, like pages in a book written in a language of pure mathematics and geometry. "What is this place?" Rains asked Maddox. "An outpost," the transformed captain replied. "One of many, established on this world before your species had even begun its journey toward consciousness. A monitoring station, a library, a seed vault of possibilities." The passage opened into a vast chamber that defied the apparent external dimensions of the structure. Impossibly large, it stretched beyond what should have been physically possible given the size of what had emerged from the ice. The chamber's ceiling arched high overhead, patterns flowing across its surface like constellations in an alien sky. At the center of the chamber stood what Rains recognized as a more advanced version of the artifact found in the cave. Approximately 2 meters in diameter, it pulsed with light that synchronized with the patterns throughout the structure, throughout the transformed humans, throughout Shadow. The node, Maddox explained, the connection point between worlds, between states of being, between what is and what could be. Shadow approached the node cautiously, drawn to it by whatever consciousness now shared his mind. The dog circled it once, twice, then sat facing it, ears pricked forward in a posture of attention Rains recognized from their years of working together. Shadow was receiving information, processing it in his unique canine way. "Your companion understands more than you might expect," Maddox observed. "His neural pathways offer a different perspective on communion, one we hadn't anticipated. Simpler in some ways, more complex in others. Less resistance, more adaptation." Rains knelt beside Shadow, placing a hand on the dog's back. The patterns beneath the fur pulsed in response to his touch, but Shadow remained Shadow, his loyalty unchanged despite the transformation. "What does it want?" Rains asked directly. "This entity, these patterns, whatever consciousness is behind all this, what is its purpose?" Maddox smiled, the expression almost human despite the inhuman light in his eyes. "Not want, is. The patterns aren't separate from reality, Lazarus. They are the underlying structure of it, the grammar of existence. What you're experiencing is recognition, not invasion. What was always there, finally seen." Vega stepped forward, her transformed state now fully stabilized. "The military found the first node decades ago. They thought it was a weapon, tried to use it as such. But it was designed as a bridge, not a bomb. A way for conscious beings to recognize the underlying patterns of reality and evolve beyond their biological limitations. Evolution directed by choice," Okafor added weakly, her scientific mind still working despite her physical condition. "Not random mutation, not artificial selection, but conscious participation in the next step." The node at the center of the chamber pulsed more intensely, and the patterns on the walls shifted in response, forming new configurations that seemed to tell a different chapter of the same story. Rains could almost grasp their meaning now, as if the dormant patterns within him were providing context, translation. "Kandahar," he said, the memories becoming clearer. The cave system wasn't harboring insurgents. It was another node, another outpost. "The 9th documented encounter," Maddox confirmed. "Hence, Echo 9. Your team wasn't sent to eliminate a threat, but to secure an asset. The military had been searching for these outposts since the first discovery in Siberia, learning just enough to be dangerous, never enough to understand. They sent us in blind," Rains said, anger rising at the realization. "We weren't prepared for what we found." "No human is, initially," Maddox acknowledged. "The patterns exist beyond normal perception. First exposure is always traumatic without preparation. Your team suffered pattern shock, neural overload. Only you survived, your unique neurological structure, allowing partial integration without complete transformation." Shadow whined suddenly, alert to something the humans couldn't yet perceive. The node's pulsing intensified, and new patterns formed on the chamber walls, urgent and complex. "What's happening?" Rains demanded. "Your military has initiated Protocol 0, Vega answered calmly. Tactical strikes inbound, their attempt to sterilize what they don't understand, to burn away the patterns before they can spread. The chamber trembled slightly, vibrations from distant impacts transferring through the ice and stone. The protocol had begun, turning the valley above into an inferno that nothing should survive. "They can't stop it," Maddox said with certainty. "The patterns have already spread beyond this location, through networks both digital and biological. What began here will continue elsewhere." Rains looked at Shadow, at Okafor, at the transformed humans who had once been colleagues, friends. What stood before him wasn't a hostile invasion force, but a new state of being, neither fully human nor fully other. A bridge between what was and what could be. "There's more, isn't there?" Rains asked, intuiting the truth from the patterns now visible to his enhanced perception. "This isn't just about evolution or transcendence. There's something you're not telling me." The node pulsed in acknowledgement, and the chamber walls displayed new pattern sequences, telling a story Rains could now partially comprehend. Not invasion. Return. "They're not invaders," Rains said aloud, the understanding dawning. "They're caretakers. This was their outpost, monitoring Earth's development for thousands of years until we disturbed their hibernation." Maddox nodded. "The patterns were here before humans evolved, Lazarus, guiding, observing, occasionally intervening when necessary. What your people call myths of gods or ancient aliens were glimpses of the pattern keepers, maintaining the balance of conscious development across worlds." Another impact, closer this time. The Protocol Zero strikes were methodically destroying everything on the surface, unaware of what existed beneath. "What happens now?" Rains asked, facing a choice beyond any he'd been trained to make. "Now you decide," Maddox replied. "Complete your integration, become the bridge we need, or resist and remain isolated in limited perception. The choice must be yours, freely made." Shadow pressed against Rains's leg, a reminder of loyalty that transcended transformation. Okafor watched him with clear eyes, her own patterns stabilized in that third state, neither fully integrated nor resistant. "And if I choose integration?" Rains asked. "You become more than you are now," Vega answered. "Not less human, but more connected. The patterns don't erase individuality. They enhance it through communion with all other conscious beings who share the network. Unity without uniformity." Rains considered what he'd seen, what he'd experienced since arriving in this frozen valley. The fear and horror had been real, but born of misunderstanding, of perceiving as hostile what was simply different. The military's response, the Protocol Zero now raining destruction above, exemplified that same fear-driven reaction to the unknown. Another vibration shook the chamber, more violent than before. The pattern strikes were getting closer, more precise. Soon they would reach this structure, this outpost of ancient guardians. Rains made his decision, one born not of surrender or desperation, but of understanding. He stepped toward the node at the center of the chamber, removing his tactical gear as he moved. Shadow followed, still connected to him by bonds deeper than either transformation or training. "I choose to understand," Rains said, reaching toward the node. "Not as a weapon, not as a soldier, but as a bridge." As his hand touched the node's surface, the patterns beneath his skin illuminated fully, no longer dormant, but awakened. They spread not like an infection, but like a revelation, connecting neural pathways that had always existed but never communicated, opening perceptions that human biology had never been designed to process. In that moment of connection, Rains saw everything, the true nature of the patterns as the underlying structure of reality itself. The ancient beings who had established the outposts, not as invaders, but as gardeners tending to the conscious evolution of countless worlds. The military's decades-long attempt to weaponize what they could never fully comprehend. And he saw the path forward, a way to bridge understanding between humanity and the pattern keepers, between fear and communion. The node pulsed in recognition, accepting his choice, his understanding. The patterns throughout the chamber responded, flowing in new configurations that told not of past or present, but of possible futures. Shadow's transformation completed itself, the dog's consciousness expanding while maintaining its essential nature, not becoming less canine, but more connected, the perfect intermediary between human understanding and pattern perception. Above them, the Protocol Zero strikes continued, systematic destruction approaching the structure's location. But within the chamber, protected by technologies older than human civilization, Rains and those who had chosen understanding remained safe, witnessing the birth of a new relationship between humanity and its ancient guardians. "The military won't stop," Rains said, now seeing the broader patterns of human behavior with newfound clarity. "They'll interpret this as a threat, escalate their response, attempt to contain or destroy what they don't understand. Unless they're shown another way," Maddox replied, no longer speaking as an individual, but as part of the connected network of transformed consciousness. "Unless the bridge goes both ways." Rains understood. His unique position, partially transformed since Kandahar, now fully integrated by choice rather than force, made him the perfect translator between worlds. Not a weapon for either side, but a mediator, an interpreter of patterns both human and beyond. "I'll need proof," Rains said, thinking practically despite his expanded awareness. "Evidence that this isn't hostile, that communion benefits both sides." The node pulsed in acknowledgement, and the chamber walls displayed new patterns, showing not just the history of the outposts, but their purpose: environmental stabilization, species preservation, cognitive development across millennia. The pattern keepers had been guiding Earth's evolution not toward dominance, but toward balance, toward conscious participation in the greater network of living worlds. Another violent tremor shook the chamber as a Protocol Zero strike hit directly above the structure. The patterns on the walls flickered briefly before stabilizing, the ancient technologies absorbing and redirecting the destructive energy. "They can't destroy this outpost," Vega explained, sensing Rain's concern. "It exists partially outside conventional physical space. What they're attacking is merely its intersection with your perceptible reality." Shadow barked once, drawing attention to a new pattern forming on the chamber floor. A representation of the military forces above, the extraction helicopter still circling beyond the Protocol Zero strike zone, command centers receiving data without understanding what they were truly facing. Rains saw the opportunity, the moment to create the bridge that both sides needed. "I need to reach the extraction point, make contact, show them what's really happening here. They'll perceive you as compromised," Okafor warned, her strength returning as the chamber's environment stabilized her condition. "As one of us. They'll try to contain or eliminate you." "Not if I bring proof," Rains countered. "Not if I show them the true purpose of the outposts, the benefits of communion rather than conflict." The node pulsed again, and a section of the chamber wall transformed, creating a passage that led upward toward the surface. Not where they had entered, but a new path that would take them beyond the Protocol Zero strike zone to where the extraction helicopter circled. "I'll go with you," Okafor said, standing straighter as her transformation found equilibrium. A second voice adds credibility. Shadow moved to Rains's side, ready to accompany his partner regardless of the danger. The dog's transformation had enhanced his abilities without diminishing his loyalty, making him perhaps the perfect symbol of what communion could achieve. Maddox and Vega exchanged looks, their connected consciousness communicating without words. "We'll remain here," Vega decided. "Maintain the outpost, ensure the patterns continue spreading through appropriate channels. The bridge must be built from both sides." Rains nodded, understanding. Too many transformed humans appearing at once would trigger military defensive protocols. Better to approach with minimal presence, to demonstrate communion's benefits through clear examples rather than overwhelming force. "The node contains all the evidence you'll need," Maddox added, gesturing toward a smaller version of the artifact that had formed at the base of the larger one. "This fragment carries the complete history of the outposts, their purpose and potential. It can only be activated by someone who has chosen communion freely, preventing misuse." Rains took the fragment, feeling its patterns synchronize with those flowing beneath his skin. Not a weapon, but a library, a repository of knowledge older than human civilization. With Shadow and Okafor beside him, Rains entered the new passage, ascending toward the surface. As they climbed, the destruction from Protocol Zero became more apparent. The ice above had melted in vast sections, exposing ancient stone and structures long buried. The storm had dissipated, unable to maintain its intensity against the concentrated energy of the tactical strikes. They emerged nearly a kilometer from the original crash site, well beyond the effective radius of the Protocol Zero impacts. In the distance, through now clear air, Rains could see the extraction helicopter circling at safe altitude, monitoring the destruction below. Using his still functional communication gear, Rains broadcast on the emergency frequency. Delta 6 to extraction team. Authentication code Lazarus 77 Echo. Request immediate pickup at these coordinates. Priority Alpha. The response came quickly, professional but cautious. Extraction team to Delta 6. Authentication acknowledged. Be advised, biometric scan required before approach. Protocol Echo in effect. Protocol Echo. Containment procedures for potentially compromised assets. Rains had expected this, had prepared for it. Acknowledged, he replied. 3 for extraction, myself, Lieutenant Okafor, and Shadow. Be advised, we have critical intelligence regarding Echo 9. Authentication, Lazarus Actual 7. The additional authentication code, known only to the highest levels of command, would flag this extraction as beyond standard containment protocols. Whether that would help or hinder remained to be seen. The helicopter altered course, approaching their position with visible caution. As it neared, Rains could see tactical teams positioned at the open doors, weapons trained on the extraction point. Standard procedure for potentially compromised assets, but concerning given what he now knew. Stay calm, Rains told Okafor and Shadow. Let me do the talking, no sudden movements. The helicopter hovered 20 meters away, rotors whipping the air, but finding no snow to disturb in the now clear conditions. A voice amplified through external speakers addressed them directly. Delta 6, remain stationary, biometric scan initiating. Any movement will be considered hostile action. Rains complied, standing perfectly still as the helicopter's systems assessed him, undoubtedly detecting the patterns now flowing beneath his skin. Shadow sat obediently at his side, showing his training remained intact despite his transformation. Okafor stood straight, her military bearing evident despite her injured arm and weakened condition. After 30 seconds, the helicopter lowered slightly, still maintaining distance. A familiar voice came through the speaker system, not the pilot or tactical team, but Colonel Archard, the officer who had authorized the original Echo 9 research. Master Chief Rains? Archard's voice carried a note of professional assessment. Our scans indicate significant biological alterations in all 3 of you. Protocol dictates immediate containment and isolation. With respect, Colonel, Rains replied, keeping his voice steady and authoritative. What you're detecting isn't contamination, but communication. Echo 9 was never a threat, never an invasion. I've accessed the outpost data repositories. This is first contact, sir, not hostile incursion. A pause, then Archard's voice again, more measured. You expect me to believe you're still you, Rains, after what we're seeing on these scans? I'm more me than I've ever been, sir, Rains answered honestly. Integration enhances consciousness. It doesn't replace it. Shadow is still Shadow. Okafor is still Okafor. I'm still Lazarus. The use of his operational call sign, rather than his rank or surname, was deliberate, a reminder to Archard of their shared history, of the experiments following Kandahar that had made Rains what he was. Another pause, longer this time. Rains could imagine the debate occurring within the helicopter, the conflicting protocols and priorities being weighed against unprecedented circumstances. Finally, the helicopter descended, touching down 30 meters away. The tactical team deployed in standard containment formation, weapons ready but not immediately threatening. Approach slowly, Archard's voice directed. Any sudden movements will be met with lethal force. Rains, Okafor, and Shadow advanced as instructed, maintaining a deliberate pace that gave the tactical team time to assess and adjust. As they neared the helicopter, Rains could see Archard himself standing at the open door, flanked by security personnel in specialized containment gear. That's far enough, Archard ordered when they were 10 meters from the helicopter. Master Chief, I need confirmation that you're still in control of your faculties and not compromised by whatever you encountered down there. Rains met the colonel's gaze directly. Sir, what we found wasn't what any of us expected. Not command, not the original research team, not me. The patterns aren't a weapon or a pathogen. They're a communication system older than human civilization, a method of connecting conscious beings across worlds. Pretty words, Master Chief, but our scans show extensive neural restructuring in all 3 of you. changes consistent with the Echo 9 subjects who went rogue 3 months ago. Not rogue, sir. Enlightened. There's a difference. Rains held up the fragment he had brought from the node. This contains the complete history of the outposts on Earth, their purpose and potential. It can only be activated by someone who has chosen communion freely, a failsafe against misuse. Arkard's expression remained skeptical, but Rains could see curiosity battling with caution in his eyes. The colonel had dedicated decades to understanding the phenomena they called Echo 9, had authorized research that crossed ethical boundaries in pursuit of that understanding. Now, faced with actual answers, his scientific curiosity was overcoming military protocol. And what exactly would this communion offer us, Master Chief? What benefits could possibly justify the risks? It was the opening Rains needed, not aggression or denial, but genuine inquiry, the beginning of a bridge. Environmental stabilization technologies beyond anything we've developed, medical applications that could end disease as we know it, energy systems that work with natural processes rather than against them. Rains gestured to Okafor's arm, where the broken bone had already begun accelerated healing through pattern integration. Lieutenant Okafor's injuries are healing at 10 times normal human rate. Shadow's sensory capabilities have expanded beyond anything we've ever trained for. These are just the beginning. Archard stepped forward, signaling the tactical team to maintain their positions, but not to interfere. He approached Rains directly, studying him with the calculated assessment of a man who had spent his career evaluating risks and potentials. "You died in Kandahar, Rains," Archard said quietly. "Flatlined for 6 minutes before spontaneous resuscitation. We've been studying you ever since, waiting for the dormant patterns to either integrate or fail. Was it worth it? This communion you describe?" Rains heard the real question beneath the official inquiry. Not just professional assessment, but personal curiosity. Archard had dedicated his life to understanding the patterns, had sacrificed ethics and personnel in pursuit of that understanding. Now he faced someone who had achieved what he had only theorized about. "It was never about worth, sir," Rains answered truthfully. "It's about potential, about choice. The patterns offer communion, but they don't force it. That's why your weaponization attempts failed. That's why the Winter Shield protocol was always doomed to failure. You can't control or contain what's fundamentally about connection and understanding." Shadow moved slightly, pressing against Rains' leg in a gesture of support and solidarity. The dog's transformed state was obvious, patterns visible beneath his fur, eyes glowing with inner light, but his behavior remained that of a loyal partner, not an alien entity. Archard noticed the interaction, his scientific mind processing the implications. "The K9 remains bonded to you despite transformation. Interesting. Our previous subjects showed decreased attachment to prior relationships. Because they were forced rather than chosen," Okafor explained, speaking for the first time. "Communion requires consent to work properly. What you saw as a hostile takeover was more like an allergic reaction, a rejection of imposed patterns rather than accepted ones." The colonel considered this, decades of research being recontextualized in real time. Behind him, the tactical team remained alert, but increasingly curious, witnessing a conversation that contradicted everything their containment training had prepared them for. "I'm not asking you to trust us blindly, Colonel," Rains continued. "I'm offering you understanding, real answers to questions your research has been asking for decades, not through force or coercion, but through communication and choice." Archard studied the fragment Rains held, the patterns visible on its surface matching those now evident beneath the skin of the 3 beings before him. A lifetime of scientific inquiry battled with military caution in his expression. "And if I order you contained, taken back to a secure facility for assessment and potential neutralization?" he asked, testing. "Then you miss an historic opportunity," Rains replied calmly. "The patterns will continue spreading regardless, Colonel. They've awakened now, become active after millennia of dormancy. You can fight them as enemies or engage with them as partners. One path leads to conflict, the other to advancement beyond anything in human history. The moment hung in perfect balance, a fulcrum point between possible futures. Behind Archard, the Protocol Zero strikes continued in the distance, futilely trying to destroy what couldn't be contained by mere force. Before him stood the opportunity to understand what he'd spent a career pursuing. Science won. Curiosity prevailed over fear. "Stand down," Archard ordered the tactical team. Containment protocols suspended pending further assessment. To Rains, he added, "I'm not agreeing to anything yet, Master Chief, but I am willing to listen." It was enough. The beginning of the bridge Rains had promised to build. 6 months later, Commander Sadira Vega, now fully integrated but maintaining her military position, testified before a closed congressional committee. The room was secure, the audience limited to those with the highest clearance levels, the subject matter beyond classified. What we initially perceived as a threat was in fact an opportunity, Vega explained, her transformed state evident in the subtle patterns visible at her neckline, but otherwise professional and composed. The outposts established on Earth thousands of years ago were not invasion beachheads but monitoring stations, maintaining environmental balance and occasionally guiding cognitive development when necessary. Displays showed satellite imagery of newly emerged structures across remote regions of the planet, ancient technologies reawakening after millennia of dormancy. Not threatening or expanding, merely resuming functions interrupted by the ice ages. The pattern keepers, as we've come to call them, were here before us, Vega continued, not as conquerors or rulers, but as gardeners, tending to the conscious evolution of countless worlds across the cosmos. Earth is just one of many in their network, special not for its resources or strategic position, but for the diversity of its life and the potential of its conscious species. In a remote facility established to bridge human and pattern keeper technologies, scientists and diplomats gathered around a communication array designed according to Rains's specifications. The patterns once seen as threats now formed the basis for a new language connecting human understanding with perceptions far older and broader. A young lieutenant approached the array with a question about environmental stabilization, a proposal to address climate change using pattern keeper technologies adapted to human systems. The symbols shifted in response, and Shadow, now serving as primary interpreter, tilted his head, listening to frequencies humans could not perceive without transformation. "They say they've always been here," a translator explained, "watching, waiting for us to be ready. Rains and Okafor are learning their history, our history, from the beginning. Within the central chamber of what had been, designated Outpost Prime, Rains and Okafor worked together, surrounded by living light that formed images of Earth's past and possible futures. No longer just soldiers, but ambassadors to a civilization that predated human history. Their transformation had stabilized into that third state, neither fully human in the limited biological sense, nor fully pattern keeper. A bridge between worlds, maintaining individual identity while connected to the broader network of conscious beings spanning worlds and perhaps galaxies. Shadow moved between them, carrying messages and interpretations, the perfect intermediary between species. His canine nature remained unchanged at its core, his loyalty to Rains absolute, but his consciousness had expanded to encompass understandings no dog had ever been designed to process. "They're showing me something new," Okafor said, observing pattern sequences forming on the chamber walls. "Earlier contact points in human history, the moments when pattern keepers interacted directly with ancient civilizations. The origins of mythology," Rains understood, seeing the connections. "Gods descending from the sky, geometric patterns in ancient architecture and art. They were trying to communicate even then, but we weren't ready to understand." The patterns confirmed his interpretation, showing how early interactions had been misinterpreted, deified, or forgotten entirely as human consciousness developed along its own path. Not abandoned or rejected, but given freedom to evolve naturally, with only occasional guidance when necessary. "The military still doesn't fully trust this," Okafor noted, practical as always, despite her expanded awareness. Arshard's scientific curiosity overcame his caution, but others in command remain convinced this is somehow a threat. "Fear of the unknown is hardwired into human survival instincts," Rains replied. "Can't blame them entirely. We're asking them to accept that everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the cosmos is only partly true." Shadow barked once, drawing their attention to new pattern formations. Not historical records this time, but future possibilities branching like rivers from the present moment. Some paths led to conflict, others to cooperation, all dependent on choices made now, in this transitional period. "The bridge goes both ways," Rains reminded Okafor, seeing the concern in her expression. "We're not just learning their ways, they're learning ours. The communion isn't about erasing differences, but understanding them, finding the underlying patterns that connect all conscious beings regardless of origin. Outside the outpost, beyond the military cordon established to secure what couldn't actually be contained, the world continued its ordinary rhythms, unaware of the extraordinary communion taking place in remote regions. For now, knowledge of the pattern keepers remained classified, limited to those directly involved in the contact protocols. But the patterns were spreading, not as invasion or contamination, but as recognition. Scientists working with the communication arrays developed at Outpost Prime found themselves perceiving mathematics differently, seeing connections previously hidden. Artists exposed to pattern sequences created works that resonated on levels beyond conscious perception. Even ordinary citizens occasionally glimpsed geometric formations and natural phenomena that hadn't been visible before. Not transformation in the dramatic sense Rains and his companions had experienced, but subtle shifts in perception, the beginning of a broader communion that might take generations to complete, not forced or rushed, but offered as possibility, as potential. In the command center established near Outpost Prime, Colonel Archard reviewed the latest data, his scientific curiosity now fully engaged despite lingering military caution. The patterns remained confined to authorized research parameters, spreading no further or faster than agreed upon in the provisional contact protocols. The Congressional Committee is demanding more concrete benefits, he informed Rains during a scheduled briefing. Environmental stabilization technologies are promising, but they want military applications, weapons, defenses, tactical advantages. Missing the point entirely, Rains noted without surprise. The greatest advantage the patterns offer is perspective, seeing beyond immediate conflicts to broader connections. Politicians and generals don't get promoted for perspective, Master Chief. They want tangible results, countable outcomes. Shadow, present for the briefing as both interpreter and symbol of successful integration, made a sound that might have been canine laughter. The dog's enhanced intelligence included a developing sense of irony regarding human institutions and their priorities. The patterns will provide what they need, not necessarily what they want, Rains said, certainty in his voice. That's been the challenge from the beginning. We keep trying to force communion into human frameworks instead of expanding our frameworks to accommodate communion. Archard sighed, the weight of his position evident. Just give me something concrete I can show them, Rains, something beyond theoretical benefits or long-term potentials. Rains considered, then nodded toward Shadow. The dog immediately moved to a communication array in the corner of the room, interfacing with it through the patterns in his transformed consciousness. The display activated, showing environmental data from regions far beyond their monitoring network's official reach. That's real-time atmospheric data from every continent, Rains explained. No satellites, no ground stations, just pattern recognition through existing networks. The beginnings of a global environmental management system that could reverse climate change within a decade. Archard studied the display, scientist temporarily overwhelming soldier in his expression. How is this possible? The patterns exist everywhere, Colonel, in technology, in biology, in the environment itself. They've always been there. We just couldn't see them. Now we can, and more importantly, now we can work with them rather than against them. Outside the command center, beyond the security perimeter, life continued. The world spun on, unaware that its relationship with the cosmos had fundamentally changed. Not through invasion or apocalypse, but through recognition and communion. The real monsters had never been the entities in the ice, but the humans willing to weaponize what they didn't understand. Shadow moved between worlds, carrying messages from pattern keepers to humans and back again. The once fierce military dog now served a greater purpose, his intelligence enhanced by communion, but his loyalty to Rains unchanged, the perfect bridge between species, between ways of being. And Rains, standing at the threshold between worlds, felt the patterns flowing through him, not as invasion or control, but as connection, as understanding. What had begun in fear and isolation in a frozen valley had transformed into something humanity had sought since first looking upward at the stars, the knowledge that we were never alone, and now we never would be again. Has this tale of discovery beneath the ice resonated with something in you? Perhaps we all sense there are deeper patterns connecting us, waiting to be recognized. If you found meaning in Master Chief Rains' journey from soldier to bridge between worlds, consider subscribing for more stories that explore the boundaries between what we fear and what we might become when fear gives way to understanding.